big events. It could be Trent got married this weekend, and I think a lot of our people, apparently whoever's there, they're out this Sunday. So, but singing sounds great, and we're happy that you were here. But a lot of our folks are in Mountain Home celebrating a wedding, celebrating that they have committed their lives to each other. And so that's always a joyous occasion. Also, one of our own is about to take a trip overseas to do some really good work. Paige Johnson is going to spend 5 weeks, did I read that right? 5 weeks in India working with the White Rainbow Project. The White Rainbow Project is an organization that helps widows earn an income, because if you're a widow in India, you're just lost. You have no way of making money, so they help them earn an income, and they help the widows in that area. And let me see if I can get this right. I got to remember my Indian phonetics. Vrindavan? Well, that's wrong. I'm saying it right. Vrindavan. Okay. In Vrindavan, India, they're going to be working with the widows there for 5 weeks, and hopefully get them. They're not going in. They don't go in just to support them and financially help them for 5 weeks. They help them learn how to be self-sustaining. If you would like to know more about what she's going to do, this Wednesday we've set aside a time that she will get to explain that to us. We will have our typical devotional in here, and then us men are going to sneak into the back of what's going on in there while she talks about this program. The elders have asked her to do this because it's a really good thing that she's doing, and it's a good thing that we need to support. So come ready to hear Paige tell about what she's going to do, and even if she mispronounces it, Vrindavan, in Vrindavan, India. So that sort of thing makes me happy. I'm really happy when people decide to give their lives to something, or at least the 5 weeks, to something bigger than themselves. And if you give your life to something bigger than yourself over a period of 5 weeks, it's indicative of the fact that you're going to give your life to something bigger than yourself, the entirety of your life. And anyone who's ever been on a mission trip, especially out of the country, I went to Nova Scotia, Canada. I don't think that qualifies. But if you've been to Mexico, or you've been to the African continent, or to also India and Indonesia, those places are impoverished, and that you would give up yourself. That usually changes you more than it changes the people you're going to help. So that makes me happy. Now, I'll ask this question because a lot of times the things that make us happy are these very simplistic things. Like if you've been driving and someone just flies past you, passes you, and takes off, and then you see them about 2 miles later pulled over. Isn't it evil how much joy you take in that? Yeah, but see, yes, like there's score one for the home team. You have, we take joy in these little bitty nothings of things. Oh, a parking place. Yay! But on the opposite side, we are angered by the smallest things as well. I think I told Rachel that if I could prove that someone was walking out of Walmart and crossing the pedestrian crossing, but at a diagonal, then I should have been allowed to nudge them with my car. Just walk straight across, please. That sort of stuff just irritates the fire out of us, or maybe just me. But why? Why do we have little things that make us happy and little things that make us upset? Are we a culture that thrives on small things instead of a culture that commits ourselves to big things? To find happiness and joy and blessing within large things. and to get angry and upset and frustrated by the big things in this world. Because there are some big problems. Widows in India are being persecuted. They can't stand up. Their husband has died. And that means that they now have got to live a life of poverty. Shouldn't that make me more upset than someone crossing at a diagonal in Walmart? Or outside of Walmart? I usually don't have my car in Walmart. Usually. We make life about these little tiny things, but there's a much bigger thing going on. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at Beatitudes. And I ask about happiness because blessed just means happy. It means that it says blessed are those. A good way to translate is happy are those. So we'll be in Matthew chapter 5. This thing is yet working. Could you go to the next slide, please? Matthew chapter 5. We'll get there. If you open your Bibles, Matthew chapter 5. If you haven't memorized it, that's fine too. Wherever you have memorized. Matthew chapter 5 are the Beatitudes, and we have a tendency to make these about how exactly you're supposed to live. And this just doesn't make sense for the first four. Those are the first four. The first four are the ones we're going to look at today. Matthew chapter 5, and we'll start in verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, I've always heard, well, you got to be poor in spirit. So you can be poor in spirit, for that's the kingdom of heaven. And they turned all the Beatitudes into be this, be a mourner, be someone who's meek. But I think Jesus is doing something completely different than telling us how we should be. He's not telling us about us. He's telling us about God. Blessed are the poor in spirit. What in the world does poor in spirit mean? Don't answer that, because our typical answer is wrong. Poor in spirit means someone who's, in the Greek, the way this has been phrased, it means someone who has so little money that it affects their demeanor. This is not about lowly, it's about economics. When he says poor, he means that they genuinely don't have any money. He's talking about people who are suffering in this world. The next one makes more sense. Well, this isn't going to... Yeah. Blessed are those who mourn. Now, this is the one that's always... If we've said, well, you got to be poor in spirit, and then the next one everyone says, well, you got to mourn. What? Now, this one, the way we've always interpreted this, just flat doesn't make sense to me. Blessed are those that mourn. Well, see, you got to be like a mourn. You got to mourn. Maybe this is why growing up in church, everyone just seems so sad all the time. Just scowling. There wasn't, somebody did. You remember? You may remember this. Someone does something crazy happens in church. Like, well, it's not on my pants anymore. But earlier, Mason took a drink of water and went like that, and just this tiny little stream that could have cut metal came out of her mouth and hit my legs and my pants. Charlie and Helen saw this, I think. And that's a funny thing that happened. We chuckled about it. Growing up, if something funny happened, have you ever heard people say, well, you laugh the most in church because that's the place you're not supposed to? Why? Why is that the place I'm not supposed to laugh at something? Because you got to be solemn, quiet. Blessed are those who mourn. He's getting at God takes care of the people who are suffering, the people who are poor, so poor that it affects their demeanor, it affects their spirit. They shall, in the kingdom of God, that they shall be blessed. When God reigns, they shall obtain the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those that mourn, because when you mourn, God shall comfort. Next one. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. This one's tricky. All right, so stay with me for about 2 minutes, and if you don't understand it, you can drop it and you'll just take me on at my word, okay? And I'm going to explain. The New Testament was written in Greek, but Jesus didn't speak Greek. He spoke Aramaic. So a lot of times when a verse is difficult, often when it comes up like in a word like meek, and everyone says, "Oh, well, how do you define meek?" And everyone has a different definition. We got to decide, well, what exactly is Jesus saying? Like the word we translate meek is translated, if you translate that back into Greek, take the original Greek, and then take that Greek and run it back to the Hebrew or to the Aramaic, you get a word that actually means, and if you want to know the process by which I did this, you can come talk to me, but it's really boring. It involves something called the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Old Testament. See, I'm already boring you. But there's the word that often gets translated from the Hebrew into this Greek word that gives us the English word meek is a word for dirt poor. That word actually fits what's going on in this stanza. Is blessed are those, and look at how he says it. Blessed are those who are meek. Because if you are dirt poor in that world, what's the one thing that's going to save you? If you inherited some earth. The next one, and we're going to go through all these, and then we're going to come back and look at what it all means. Because there's 3 stanzas in the Beatitudes. We're going to do one today, one next week, and then the final little bit 2 Sundays from now. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Okay, so we've got 4 statements. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, so have so little money that they are broken. Blessed are those who are mourning. People who have lost their husbands, their wives, their children, their parents, people who have lost their land, people who are suffering because of the tragedies that move them to tears. Blessed are they because they will be comforted. And blessed are those who are the poorest of poor. Blessed are the meek, because in God's kingdom they will be given land. They will inherit the earth. And he says, blessed are those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now, I would say that you need to be righteous. Like you need to be righteous. Like I've counseled marriages before, never here, but back in Teague, I counseled marriages before, and what I find myself a lot of times saying is, it doesn't matter what you're hoping to do. In your marriage, it doesn't matter what you want to do, it matters what you do. It doesn't matter who you're trying to be, it matters who you are. Because your spouse never sees who you're trying to be, they only see who you are. And so if your spouse says, hey, it seems like you never do this, and she should never say never, but hey, nobody's perfect. You never do this. And you say, how, she's always on my case, or he's always on my case. I'm trying. Who cares? They can't see you trying. They can only see you doing. And so if you would say to me, Benjamin, how should I live? I would say, live a righteous life. Live a life that reflects that you love God, that you are interested in what He's interested in. And you would just tell me, you know what? I want that. I want to do that. I would say, well, why not? No. Well, see, I'm hungering and thirsting for such a life, but I'm not living it. Hungering and thirsting means that you want something that you're not getting. When you're hungry for food, it's not often when you have food. So what's he getting at here? Another way to translate this word righteousness is justice. Blessed are those who are hungering and thirsting, deeply desiring the justice of God. See, these first four stanzas, or the first four lines in the Beatitudes, are not about how you should live as much as they are about how good God is. When people are so poor, they're broken, God takes care of them. Whenever they are mourning the loss, God takes care of that. When they, again, repeats, and I'm not alone on this. Just about every good commentary you pick up will explain these four verses exactly like this. Makes me wonder that why we haven't been picking up a whole lot of good commentary. But if you're poor, when you're suffering in this world, when God's kingdom comes, they shall be comforted. The kingdom shall be theirs. They will inherit the thing they've been desiring all their life. Blessed are those who are deep in their bones desiring God's righteousness. This world is a broken world. It's not the way it should be. And I don't say that pointing outside the walls. I say that to the people sitting in the walls. We're not who we should be. I'm not who I should be. We are living in a broken society. And it's been broken since we took a bite of the fruit. It hasn't just been broken over the past 20 years. It hasn't been broken over the past century. It hasn't been broken over the past millennium. It's been broken a long time. Things are not the way they should be. Jesus begins the most famous sermon ever. And no one read it out loud in time. It's like 5 minutes. Jesus begins the most famous sermon ever by saying, the brokenness of this world, when God rules, when people are longing for some sort of justice, for His righteousness. People are longing for that. When people are longing to be comforted. When people are longing for the balance of power to no longer be the super rich and the dirt poor. People think that the world should look differently than that, and we should all have enough to eat. Jesus says that day is coming. He begins the sermon in which he tells us a lot of things that we should do. He tells us about how to handle our anger and how to handle disputes, and he tells us how to not take oaths and talk about marriage and lust, and he talks about a lot of different things. Judging other people. And he does say you need to live a certain way, but he begins his sermon not by telling us just straight out, here's who you need to be, but he begins the sermon by saying, this is what God is like. God takes care of the people who cannot take care of themselves. God takes care of the people who are mourning and they just can't overcome it. He's the one who comforts. He's the one who gives. He's the one who supplies all we need. God's always done this. Go back and look at the Ten Commandments. And he begins the Ten Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, not by saying, all right, guys, rule 1, no other gods but numero uno. God knows Spanish. No other gods but this one. He doesn't begin. He says, here's the thing. First off, I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt. Can you imagine the people there? Like they worship Ra and Amun and all these other Egyptian gods. And those gods are gods of the sun, the gods of the crop, the god of the rain, the god. You don't have a God of the people. Here this God comes in and rescues them and then says, I'm your God. My God. That concept's not that foreign to us, but it was really foreign to them. I get to have a God. He says, here are some rules, but before we get to the rules, I want to tell you what kind of God I am. And this is where we've fallen short. Is our world is hungering and thirsting for this type of God, and all we can do sometimes is get straight to the rules. If you want to be a Christian, you got to live like a Christian. You want to be a Christian, you got to give up that sin. You want to be a Christian, you got to do this. You got to do that. There's 5 steps. At first. And there's more. Never be good enough. But we say here's what you gotta do without telling them, here's who we're doing it for. Does anyone know anything about Michael Jordan? Anybody know what he did with his tongue while he was playing? Ow, thank you, Brady. Got a visual example of those of you who are paying attention. He stuck it out. When he was playing, tongue all the way out. Just disgusting. Didn't want to take a charge because he'd lick you square in the nose. I don't know how he didn't bite that thing off. People, when I was growing up, you did while you played basketball would stick your tongue out. Because that's what Michael Jordan did. And that's what I want to do. Now, and this is a rhetorical question, don't answer this. Does it make you a better basketball player to stick your tongue out? It didn't me. I mean, listen, apparently I should have been mastering getting my elbow under my shooting hand instead of trying to stick my tongue out. I should have been mastering the things that actually make you a good basketball player. Michael Jordan had developed that, sticking his tongue out, because that's what he's doing when he's trying really hard. But we just skip straight to that one thing. Well, let's just do that thing. Maybe if I can just go to church every single Sunday, I'll be... You can go to church every single Sunday. You can sing every single song. You can know every single good thing to say in a prayer, but if you don't know Jesus, it's all for naught. And you can have this great understanding of how I'm supposed to handle disputes and how I'm supposed to handle arguments and how I'm supposed to forgive other people and how I'm supposed to not judge. And you can know all that stuff, but you're not going to be sufficient at it until you know the one who truly is. Until you know the King. Jesus begins this sermon not by saying you need to get your stuff in order. He begins how God has always begun. By saying, I want you to see for a second how fantastic of a God we serve. Because in His presence, in God's presence, even those who are hungering and thirsting for His righteousness, who are seeking His justice, those who are dirt poor, those who have lost a loved one and they just can't pull it together, even those people are happy. even those people are blessed. Because that's just the kind of God we serve. If you've been wrestling with religion, probably because you haven't found relationship. If you've been wrestling with rules, it might be because you just don't truly know Jesus. My dad has a sign in his shop. My dad's a welder in Queen, owns a business there called Neely's Welding. Very clever name. But he has a sign in his shop that says, "No spitting on the floor." Do you think people spit on the floor at his shop? Guys do. They just come in, it's just sort of it's a big open air shop. I mean, it's got giant wooden doors and it's dirty, and you don't think not to spit if you're a spitter, you know. If you like that kind of thing. By contrast, here in the church, we have yet to put up a no spitting sign. Plenty of spitters come to church, but no spitting. It's because the believed relationship, or the understood relationship, is one of respect of the place. They don't feel that about that shop like people feel that about a church building or your home. Same guy could come to Dad's house, stand in his kitchen, never spit. Dad doesn't have a sign. You see, the sign, the rule, often means, when you put a rule in place, it often means you're going to have to wrestle with that. But if we could just understand that, like when I go into my dad's shop, never spit. It's not because of the sign, it's because I love my dad. And so we obey rules, not because the rules are in place, but because the King is in place. We obey the law not because he's somehow going to punish us if we don't. It's because we love the one who put them in place. So if you in this place where I just can't live the Christian life, it's like someone. If you don't know Jesus and you say that, it's like someone coming up to you who's single saying, "You know, I'm having a real hard time being a good husband." But you're not a husband. Like, you can't be a good husband until you've committed yourself to somebody as a husband. You can't be a good Christian until you've understood that Jesus is the ultimate person to follow. He's the ultimate king to bow down to. He is the one who rules. Our God is the kind of God that when people are suffering, when people are poor, when people are mourning, they are longing for His justice. He seeks them out. Two scriptures that aren't in the Bible. I know it's a wicked phrase, but it happens. Two scriptures I heard growing up that are not in the Bible, you will find it. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Actually, that's all Leviticus is about. But it's not in there. Cleanliness is not next to godliness. God likes cleanliness, but it's not next to it. God helps those who help themselves. Once heard a woman quote that, and I said, actually, that's not in the Bible. She said, oh, well, the concept's there. No, not. The concept's not there either. Actually, the Bible teaches this is the exact opposite concept. These first four stanzas in the Beatitudes teach us the exact opposite thing. God helps those. God helped us when we could not help ourselves. When we couldn't forgive our own sins. We couldn't live the life just perfect. We couldn't get the laws just right. God comes by and beats death for us. He helps us when we can't help ourselves. He helps the poor whenever they can't help themselves. He helps those who are mourning when they can't comfort themselves. He helps those who are longing for the justice of God. He will come through. So living the life of a Christian is in response to knowing the goodness of God. It's really difficult to work the equation backwards, and we've been trying to do that for a long time. I was taught 5 steps of salvation were: hear that baptism is good for you, believe that baptism is good for you, repent and believe that baptism is good for you, confess that baptism will save you, and get baptized finally. Those aren't it. It's hear that Jesus is King. Believe that Jesus is King. Repent from your own kingship, your own kingdom, and turn to His kingdom. Confess that He is King and be united with Him in baptism. I say all that. I'm not a big fan of lines. The gospel is not a line-by-line strategy by which I can get my get-out-of-hell free card. The gospel is the lines in the life of Jesus that points us to a God that loves us unconditionally. We respond in ways that are healthy, that are talked about in the Bible. Gospel is not our set of salvation. You know, here at Church of Christ, we have the 5 steps of salvation, found nowhere in order as listed as the 5 steps of salvation. Over there, they have the Roman road. They have the 6 principles of the gospel. They have it. We can do all of those things without knowing that Jesus is King. So by all means, let's do those things eventually. Let's live the life eventually. Let's forgive eventually. It's baptism. Let's commit our lives to Jesus through baptism eventually. But let's first wrap our head around the fact that of what kind of God He is. Because I don't want you to respond to the gospel of baptism when you can respond to the gospel of Jesus. Jesus we worship is worth coming down from. He's worth seeking His help. Because if you're mourning or you're just longing for His righteousness, or your life just is broken, He's the kind of God who hears you. He's the kind of God who loves you. If that isn't good news worth responding to, I don't know what is. So come forward if you need to. Grab your neighbor if you need to. Talk to anybody. Grab anybody. That's what's great about church. If you don't try to live your week just following the rules of God without recognizing first the goodness of God, you won't be able to do it. Recognize that He is good, that He is holy, that He loves you, and all of a sudden your life starts to live out a following that looks like your Savior. So may you be blessed this week. And may that blessing, whether it's peace, comfort, love, or maybe you just see the forgiveness of God as your own beautiful blessing, may that blessing move you to new heights, to new life found only in Jesus. If you need anything this morning, please.